Good afternoon, and welcome to our Strategic Planning and Budget Committee meeting on December 14th, 2022 for the 2023 plan and budget process. I will now call on Tim Brubaker, Deputy Clerk, to conduct the roll call. Tim.
Thank you. Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig.
Present.
Councillor Deutschmann. Councillor Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Chair Harris.
Present.
Councillor Huenick.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Nowak. Councillor Salonen said she's running a little bit late. Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Verbanovic is also running late. Councillor Williams.
Present.
And Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gathered today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Before we move into the presentation, I would like to thank our colleagues and staff for the great discussion we had at our first meeting. As a recap, last meeting we heard an overview of preliminary engagement results, reviewed the draft 2023 plan, and discussed the fiscal context and pressures facing us as we work towards our 2023 plan and budget. The meeting was focused on context, and that continues today with more information to be presented by staff. Again, our goal here is to keep the conversation moving. With that in mind, I ask that you try to limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. And if you have additional questions, we of course will add you to the back of the queue after others have had the chance to speak. So with that, I'll turn it now over to Connie McDonald, Chief Communications and Strategy Officer, to kick off the presentation. Connie.
Great. Thank you, Chair Harris, and through you. Today is another step forward in the development of our 2023 plan and budget. A quick reminder that through the plan and budget process, Council will look at aligning our strategic and annual business plan objectives, establish the service levels for the coming year, approve financial and staff resources to deliver those services, determine property tax and user rate revenue requirements, and set user rates, fees, and charges. We are still currently in the contextual phase of the process, so providing information that will support the full budget presentation in January and the decisions to come. Today, we will spend most of our time providing an overview of current service levels and proposed service level enhancements. We will then provide an early look at the 2023 capital program and talk about the tax rate pressures and the capital operating reserve relationship. Last meeting, we provided an overview of the draft plan for 2023 that took into consideration the current strategic plan, the regional official plan, program-specific master plans and business plans, and our asset management plan. We also briefly touched on the services that we provide as part of delivering on these plans. As the chart on the screen shows, each plan contributes to the council-approved and directed service levels that the region provides. Today, we will do a deeper dive into the services the region provides and the different levels of service that we currently have to meet our strategic goals. But before we do that, I believe it's important to ground ourselves in our why. Services are really about people. Everything that we do is about delivering the programs and services and supports that residents need. Service changes, whether past, present, or future, are about prioritizing the needs of residents today, supporting the residents and the community that we want in the future, and balancing those needs with affordability. Some of our services are external facing and interact directly with residents, and some of our services are internal and designed to enable service delivery and support those people delivering services. Regardless, the services that we provide are focused on people and the outcomes that we hope to achieve for them. They're also provided through the important lenses of equity, climate action, balancing urban and rural, partnerships, and efficiency, effectiveness, and value for money. With that brief introduction, I'll turn it over to Mathieu to start with our sustainable transportation services.
Thank you, Connie.
through the chair. So on the next slide, please. So regarding sustainable transportation, so with the team, we provided a number of data points for you to help you kind of see what is the volume of service that's being provided with the budget that we had in 2022. So you see the number of service hours. Maybe in addition to that, just to give you a bit of a sense of the general service and the cost of it. So the transit system here it's about a $200 million operating budget annually. So we generate $40 million in revenue. It moves about, so there's about a bit almost, it's around 100,000 trips every weekday. So that's people moving around the region. And a core bus route is, if you want to reference compared to the numbers that are there, a core bus route is about 30,000 hours of service per year. So that's about $3 million. So the order of magnitude for you is that one to understand. The local 30-minute frequency bus route, for example, is going to be more between 5,000 and 10,000 service hours per year, which corresponds to about $500,000 to $1 million per year. The reinstatement of 10-minute frequencies of service that was part of the service restoration plan that was approved by council in June of this year is about 15,000 hours, and that's what enables us to bring 10-minute service back to the 201 and 202 express buses, for example. So there's also there's an important affordability element to the transit program. So we know that a number of our affordable transit program, which provides a near 50% discount on fares and passes, has really picked up significantly this year. So as has ridership, but today, I think in April we had about 4,000 registered users, and at the end of September we were up to 7,200. So that's an important component because we want to make sure that this transit service is affordable by everyone. And in terms of service levels, we're basically back at the levels that we were offering pre-pandemic, except for late evening service and weekend. So you'll see the number of routes there and some data. So today, I would say in the last month, we had a number of routes that are beyond pre-pandemic ridership levels, so especially the university routes, the I-Express routes. And Mobility Plus has also picked up and provides service to nearly 2,000 active registrants. Next slide, please. And if I turn, so there I didn't have enough bullets on the previous slide to talk about the LRT service, but that backbone now is really critical. So you see in terms of volume, again, it's about 50,000 service hours. So multiply by 100 to get a bit of the budget impacts. Regarding roads, so the annual budget is about 65 million. That includes about half of it to support capital and rehabilitation. So resurfacing is about we resurface approximately 50 to 100 kilometers of roads per year. So and that covers the entire regional network. In the cities, a lot of the work is contracted back to the cities in the urban areas. So in our budget, about 10 millions actually goes back to the cities through contracts that are indexed on inflation, so around 8%. The maintenance, the daily maintenance levels of service that we provide are mostly regulated through by the province. So we know, for example, that we'll see tomorrow with the freezing rain and the snow that's coming down, but depending on traffic and speed on every road, where we have specific levels of service, which tell us basically within how many hours we have to respond to clear the roads and make them safe for all possible users, both for roads and bike lanes and also prevention. So we know tomorrow, for example, with the icing icing event, there will be some ice prevention measures that will be put in place before. So usually using salt brine, so we use about 12,000 tons of salt every year, but a lot of it has been reduced through a salt management program, and now we're using salt brine to prevent the icing and facilitate the snow removal later in the day. So that's about $5 million there that go for winter maintenance, and similarly there's $3 million for traffic signals. We have about 530 traffic signals across the region that we support and maintain to make sure that everyone can use them safely. We also have, just to give also a sense of the levels of service are also increasing as we go and as we move towards complete streets, because we're putting in more curbs, more lighting, more tree planting, more bike trails, and to provide a different level of service, different quality of service to our residents. But that also has an impact on our maintenance budgets. And maybe just to talk about road safety specifically, the program is really based on there's three elements to it. One is an educational program, so there are a number of educational opportunities, and these are things we will continue to work on. There's enforcement. So today we've had some success along near school sites with automated speed enforcement, where we have 16 sites that are equipped near schools to protect and make sure that the speeds do go down near these critical schools. And we also have a number of countermeasures that are being deployed throughout the region. So mostly focusing on speed reductions through residential areas and also intersection controls. And for active transportation, so I mentioned the cycling facilities and the needs for maintenance there. So today we're at 300 lane kilometers of on-road cycling facilities, a few kilometers on trails, but also some design changes that we've worked on in the past few years. So working in particular towards really protecting the bike lanes and putting them on the sidewalks rather than alongside of the road where curbs are available. So many of the new projects that you'll see have multi-use trails, for example, where really the bike facility is fully protected from the rest of the road. And maybe I can open the floor for any questions if you have any at this point.
Questions? Councillor Erb.
Thank you. The ridership are in numbers and number of people using it in trips. If I recall correctly, during COVID, other than government funding, one of our biggest drops in revenue was from the LRT. I'm wondering where those numbers are now in dollars, like what we went down and where we're at now.
So today for the LRT and the iExpress buses, we're basically at pre-pandemic levels. We're maybe 3%. I think the LRT were 3 or 5% below, but it's still increasing. So we're right now. There's no. I mean, yeah, we're back to pre-pandemic levels.
In dollars
So and in revenue is the same.
In revenue as well. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Jim took my question. I'm good.
Yeah? No, Jim stole your question. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. First off, it's still 1-0 France. I'm sure some of you pins and needles. I just wanted to know, is it possible to get a list of the various discounts that we do offer to different groups in the community just to see what that looks like?
Sure, yeah, we can provide that. So there's been the big, the whole scheme has been really simplified over the last, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago with that affordable transit program, where we really focused the discounts to an affordability condition as opposed to age-based concessions or other concession bases. But yeah, we're happy to bring that back.
Yeah, I'd just like to see what we do because I'm getting calls from seniors, for example, who are inquiring, and I just wanted to see what we do currently as we go into this process. So thank you for that.
Yep.
I don't have everybody else on the speakers list.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't. Yes. Oh, Councillor McCabe, you have a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't see on here.
Sorry, I'm just, I'm getting logged
know.
into the system,
We should-
sorry. Sorry about that. I just wanted, first of all, I'm happy to see there's more routes being added and service, like in terms of the active transportation stuff and the additional bus routes. But and I know that the logistics are tricky. So in terms of like which routes are, where people are going to be using them more quickly. So thanks for keeping an eye on that. I know I assume it's pretty tricky stuff. I just wanted to ask, or just wanted to make a couple of notes. One make a request about Route 31, which is out in Vista Hills, if that's going to be one of the routes that you think might be available for increased service, partly because that's close to where the new hybrid shelter is going to be. Like that's kind of out in that general area. And I also just wondered if, about a few other improvements, if this is the time to talk about it, like wind barriers and that kind of stuff at LRT stations, because the wind really whips through some of those areas. But I also just wanted to ask, particularly given the really unfortunate accident that just happened at the roundabout at Ira Needles and Herb Street, what might be, what thought you've given to, or your staff, if there's been time to give to, just, I think overall we need to decrease speeds across like side streets, regional roads, collector roads in general, but then how we make those roundabouts, and particularly that one where there's been 2 residents hit in the past 3 or 4 months, how we make them more safe for people, pedestrians, cyclists, people using other mobility devices to cross, because it's quite dangerous. So I don't know if signalized crossings are possible or what, but obviously with what's happened last Friday, there's been a flood of, continued, well, it's been ongoing since that one particularly has been opened. So just wanted your thoughts on some of those.
So we're planning, through the chair, we're planning to bring back in March a full update on the road safety program. So the collision report that was shared in September that covers data up to 2021 kind of shows the level of safety or perceived safety. I think today, I would say intersections with traffic signals remain the most dangerous for pedestrians. And roundabouts are much safer because, and partly, for the reason that you stressed, that they do slow down vehicles, actually much more significantly than traffic lights, where people try to zip through when the light is favorable to them or even orange. But we'll bring that back to council in March, including the range of countermeasures that have been used in the past. There's a number of pilots also that have been set up, so we can talk about that at that time if you'd like. In the meantime, I think for that specific roundabout, we will review the characteristics of it. We know the conditions of lighting are things that you have to look at in particular to see how they're being used in the evening, especially in the winter. And these are things that we'll also review. But we'd like to bring a comprehensive report to make sure that we're addressing all the root causes, and we'll bring that to you in March or in the spring of next year.
Well, yeah, I'd be very interested to see that report. I know there's been ongoing discussion in the community kind of at large, and I'm not a road engineer or traffic engineer, fully admit that, but they certainly don't feel safe. Like when I've tried to use them, and certainly the experience, it's anecdotal, I fully admit that, but when you watch people going through there, it doesn't look like it's slowing much traffic down on the entrances and the way that people can accelerate out of them. So thank you for taking a closer look at that one. I mean, with the volume with Tim Hortons right there and the businesses around there, and then the people going out to Costco, it's a really, really busy one. And then there's the 2 seniors homes right there as well. So thank you for taking a look at that. The other, I had another question about Mobility Plus. and wondered, and I raised it when we were out on the tour a couple of weeks ago, but just wondered about improved logistics, GPS functioning, frequency, or other improvements. Are there improvements to that system or service being planned?
So through the chair, today I think the system is based through a registration, and it is a bit more paper based. I think we've been working with the suppliers of our fare boxes to see, and that's been for some time, to see how we could have more mobile devices on there and mobile payment devices on the vehicles. And I know there are some technology questions there that are being looked at through the contract that we have with that fare provider. So these are definitely improvements that we'll be able to bring forward as soon as they're, I would say, operationally, and as soon as they're really reliable, because we want to make sure that there's a sufficient level of reliability of that of these mechanisms before we bring them out to the public. But there are definitely some options going forward to facilitate both the registration and the payment on board and things like that.
Well, and the payment and the registration is one thing, but I think also when I look to see when a GRT bus is coming, I can just flip open my smartphone and it tells me, in real time if it's delayed or coming. So I'm just wondering why there's not that system's not connected to the Mobility Plus system, so that people, like my colleague, our colleague Chantel, because often the range is like 45 minutes or half an hour or something like that. So why there can't be that similar system that says, here's where the person using it is, like it's all just GPS. I say that like I know how that works. But, I don't know, I'm just wondering why that system isn't attached to Mobility Plus as it is to the GRT service.
Yeah, and through the chair, I'm happy to take it back and then bring it back to you. But yeah, I agree with your proposal, and that is a solution that is being brought. I know in other areas of the region where there are some of of southern Ontario where they've done a bit more work on their GPS and the booking systems and the live information system to improve that experience.
Okay, thank you. And just, sorry to go back, I probably wasn't being very articulate about the LRT stations. There's some of them that have there's no way to kind of get out of the wind, or, like Willis Way and Allen Street. I mean, those are ones that I use, but just wondered if there's even like a few, I don't know, barriers of some sort, like that plexiglass that where you could at least stand in out of the wind. I don't know if that's possible or what that does to the stations, but there's just sometimes I've been waiting out there, and other people, not just myself, but it's tough to get a place where you're not getting blasted by the wind.
Through the
just
chair,
to increase a bit of the user
we can
service.
look into that from a design perspective. I know we also want to make sure that all these stops are as clear of obstacles as possible. So I know there's also an objective of really reducing anything that you could hit into, or so we want to be careful from a design standpoint, but that's definitely something we can look on, especially if there are some specific stations where the conditions are critical, or they're more like wind tunnels, and there where we could work on to provide a better experience for customers.
Thanks. Yeah, just anything to kind of improve the user experience. And then just similar to Councillor Deutschmann, I'd be very interested in that report on reduced fares, and it's something that I too am doing some research on to have a proposal to come back to my colleagues with after the holidays. Thank you.
Councillor Nowak.
Yeah, just very quickly, Matu. Last year, there was a pilot project with regard to always stops in the rural areas, and that was supposed to be coming back to council, I think, very soon. You may have already inadvertently answered that question when you mentioned that there's going to be a major report coming back. Is that included in that report? Because I think there's a lot of concerns in the rural areas for.
Through the chair, so we can bring an interim report. I know the team that was looking at that pilot was, especially to measure accident or collision impacts. These things take time because they're hopefully and luckily they're rare events. So there is a bit of a I know that the team was trying to get a bit more time to be able to really evaluate the safety impacts of these, but we can at least we can certainly bring in an interim update in the spring of next year. So you'll see already any measurable impacts that these pilots have had on collisions at intersections.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just a few things. Number one was I used to sit on Mobility Plus not that long ago. They did a thorough, complete update, I would say 3 to 4 years ago. I saw Neil was on. When a person calls in and books their time, they give them a 45-minute window, but they also are supposed to call them 15 minutes before they're going to arrive. The 45-minute window is for the loading and unloading of the individuals because they can't define that to a fine art based on the range of disabilities. But good points anyways that I'm sure will be looked into. About the roundabout, there is multiple times that I've been driving through a roundabout and where I'm located in the 2-lane stream, I cannot see that there's a pedestrian because the car to the right of me has blocked the view of the pedestrian. So I'm coming up and I don't know that there's a pedestrian there. And we're going to have to tell everybody, be cautious if the car has slowed down beside you because that may mean a pedestrian. So it's a blindness that is a real concern. And I bet a lot of the accidents are because of that blindness. I'm just guessing again. And that maybe have to be looked at. And I don't know what we do, whether we put mirrors there so that people can see that a pedestrian is crossing. You know, in some circles you put mirrors high up and you can see. So just a thought, but yeah, and speeds on roads with roundabout are quite faster than speeds on roads without roundabouts because you have clear sailing about 90% of the time and people just whiz through. Thank you.
Councillor Huenick.
Through the chair, just a point of clarification and then a follow-up question about the LRT. So Mobility Plus, maybe in an ideal world they would call 15 minutes in advance, but they are not doing that currently. So I just want to make sure the public is aware of that. Secondly, in regard to the LRT, it's hard for me to tell where we are in the presentation versus where we're going. So forgive me if this question is premature. But there's something in the budget regarding improving accessibility of the LRT. And I realize that has to do with making sure that it's accessible to rural areas and different stops and so on and so forth. So, but my question is specifically with regard to access for those with mobility aids. Currently, as I understand it, there's no emergency ramps on the LRT because the assumption is that all of the stops are accessible, which they are, thankfully. But in a situation where the LRT is required to stop for an emergency, what is the plan there for evacuation of those with mobility aids? And has there been discussion about implementing emergency ramps on board?
Through the chair, thank you for your question. I'm not aware of that, but I can take it back to the team and we can look into that to see how we facilitate in the rare event where an LRT gets stranded between stations, how we would help with accessibility there.
Great, and if it helps, they do have these ramps set up on Go Transit already, so potentially they could be a source of wisdom, support, advice. Thanks.
Councillor McCabe for a follow-up, quick.
Yeah, just wondering, again, going back to the speeds on our regional roads, and I know it says that there's 16 sites, and I think those rotate. Just wondered about like 16 sites does not seem like a lot for a region this size when like I could use more than 16 automated speed enforcement in my city alone, right? So I'm just wondering what the process is or to actually get more of those in and you know, leave them in maybe more permanently. I'm not looking at this as a revenue generation at all, but I think, I mean, you're the expert, but you know, changing people's behaviors sometimes starts with hitting them in the pocketbook, quite frankly, right? And if there's, you know, if there's a consequence for the speeding that happens really regularly. I'm just wondering if automated speed enforcement is the way to go. And if that's something we could, potentially look at through the budget process.
Through the chair, I think we've in the budget process, we're looking at a measured expansion of these. So both from an offense processing standpoint, but also from a site expansion standpoint. So today we've been fairly conservative and very focused on school zones because because we know that a localized automated speed enforcement camera has an effect on speed, but within a limited perimeter. So people slow down there and then they accelerate after that. So we've really targeted specifically kind of vulnerable areas, but these are definitely things. So we can continue that expansion. But I think I would say the massive scale up of this would require really a transformation of the program that we can also look into, but it's maybe not a 2023 question, but more of a plan that we can look into throughout the year to bring something later in the year.
Well, I'm just curious, so why is it, you use the word measured, so why, there's, I don't know how many schools there are, as an example, or long-term care homes, or seniors centers, or, lots of vulnerable places where there's more vulnerable users, so why is this? I'm just looking for some rationale. I'm not challenging that. I'm just actually trying to understand what's the rationale for this measured approach. Well,
through the chair, I'll just in terms of numbers of offenses, we have a gradual increase. I think we were at 10,000 offenses that were processed in previous years. We're looking at 20,000 next year, and then 30,000 in the subsequent year. So it's measured, but unfortunately, it's small. If we multiplied the sites, it would be very easy to have 100,000, 200,000 offenses given some driver behaviors on the network. But it's already so a significant expansion is possible, but we have to do it intelligently with respect to the sites. I don't know, maybe through the chair, if I can ask Rod Ruggiero to chime in.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Yes, through the chair, there's also the issue of processing capacity at POA. So as Mr. Gutsky has indicated, we could definitely generate a lot of offenses here. And we have to do that in a way we have to implement this system in a way that we can handle it from an administrative point of view. We have an agreement right now with processing agency in Toronto to handle our offenses for the time being. And that has a certain capacity which they know they can handle. And we may be expanding that over the next little while as well.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I stand to be corrected here. I'm just wondering, this is supposed to be sort of an overall picture of our budget strategy today. And if we're getting into too many specifics that we should be dealing with at committee, and we don't want to get bogged down and lose the overall intent of today's meeting, would be my observation. But you're in the chair.
No, I appreciate you reinforcing. You did it for me, so thank you. Just a reminder that we are, asking questions of staff with regards to our budget process, and we're weighing into some operational issues that perhaps we can, but giving some leeway for some of our newer colleagues. So thank you. Councillor, I did see Foxen, Verbanovic.
Thanks very much, Chair Harris. And not wanting to get into the weeds too much, I guess I do just want to flag, though, that at budget time, I would be interested in seeing more detail to what the response has been, particularly with respect to the processing center. I know that that's what's keeping us right now to one camera and 16 sites. Incidentally, it wasn't me, but it was someone behind me. The camera's on Franklin right now, for those who are watching and want to know. Because I saw this car very quickly approaching me, and sure enough, as that happened, the flash hit them off. But my point being that I know one of the options would be for us to create our own processing center. And so I'm hoping that we'll see an issue paper on that at budget time, so that we could consider that in the 2023 budget.
I don't see any further questions if we want to carry on with our presentations.
So thank you, Chair. Go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to be speaking on the environment and climate action focus area, and I thought I'd start with the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address, part of it anyways, because it's very relevant to this action area. So this translation of the Mohawk version of the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving Address was developed and published in 1993 and provided courtesy of Six Nations Indian Museum and the Tracking Project. So the Earth Mother, we are all thankful of our mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us, and she is from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. The waters, we give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the spirit of water. Now our minds are one. So under this focus area, my department is heavily involved, obviously. So for water and wastewater services, we do have a two-tier system here in the region of Waterloo, where we provide, those numbers are actually supposed to be the other way around. We provide 56 million cubic meters of clean drinking water to the region and treat 58 million cubic meters of wastewater annually. And we have to meet provincially mandated standards and legislation. So to meet this, we perform over 54,000 tests to meet regulatory requirements and support environmental projects and programs. And actually, we do have a regional lab that performs over 135,000 tests to support drinking water, wastewater treatment, the landfill, and water supply. Our water service total asset valuation is $2.53 billion. And the good news is that our average asset condition is good. However, you will see when we get to it in the capital plan that we do have work to support our plants and facilities, as those are the ones that are in the fair or poor condition. We do operate one water surface treatment plant, which is Mannheim, and over 100 groundwater wells, and we manage operations of 13 wastewater treatment plants. And we do all this under the Safe Drinking Water Act, which came out of the Walkerton tragedy in May of 2000, where their water supply was contaminated with E. coli from a nearby farmer's field. For those of you who may not remember, over 2,000 residents became ill and 7 died at Walkerton. This is approximately half of the population of that town. So in response to that tragedy, the Safe Drinking Water Act came into being, and we're all required to meet a statutory standard of care, which I'll be talking about later in the budget process in January. Can we go to the next slide, please? In waste management, this is a one-tier system where we provide curbside and public drop-off services to the region. We have biweekly waste pickup and weekly green and blue box pickup and seasonal yard waste. We have a very good diversion rate of 63%, and we sent 153,400 tons to the landfill in 2021. And this is for the average household per week per household. It's $3.20 that we provide the service for our residents. We also, under this focus area, have Transform WR. So in 2018, all 7 area municipal councils and regional council endorsed a target to reduce Waterloo Region's community GHG emissions by 80% of the 2010 levels by the year 2050. And in June 2022, council supported 6 transformative actions with 2 specific tools to include GHG reductions as an integrated component of the region's decision-making process and create a project-specific climate implications tool and a corporate-wide carbon budget. And I just wanted to quickly run through the 6 transformative actions. So by 2050, these are all by 2050, most trips are taken using active transportation with the support of a robust public transit system. that remaining personal and commercial vehicles are zero emissions vehicles, that businesses and homes no longer use fossil fuels for space heating and cooling and water heating, that Waterloo Region uses less, wastes less, and no longer disposes organic matter into landfills, that the region has a thriving local food system built on local farming and food processing that feed much of our community, and that the region has leveraged GHG reductions to increase equity, prosperity, and resilience for all. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that this focus area does not just include infrastructure, but people too. And there was a media release today, for example, for winter warming packages for those people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, and the winter warming packages provide cold weather supplies and connection to support services. So I think that that's also something that's really important to remember. It's a holistic approach to climate action that we're doing here at the region. So thank you, and ready for some questions.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. I just wanted to do bragging rights, is that we had my husband's family Christmas at our house, and they didn't know what the green bin was, and they were surprised that we did it. And so I had bragging rights this weekend. Thank you so much.
Seeing no other questions, we'll... Oh, Councillor Sullivan. Oh, sorry, James. Councillor James.
I just had a question regarding some of those transformative actions and community outreach in terms of education. Are there any programs that are being offered now with regards to some of the outreach and education around those actions?
So through the chair to the councillor, in solid waste, for instance, and in water and wastewater, we do have programs for water conservation and efficiency, and also programs for sorting properly. And we try to reach as much as the community as we can with the staff that we have. So we do target everyone. I found out recently, new immigrants as well as people who speak different languages, because we want to make sure that people are aware of our programs of the region. And for the other actions, I'm not sure if Mr. Regier has any other thing to add, because Transform WR lands in his area, but I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot there.
Through you, Chair Harris, we of course, this is a bit of a full court press for us. We've made some very significant amendments to the regional official plan, which deal with the carbon requirements for our economy as a whole. And we have a team of people inside of Planning, Development, and Legislative Services that are working at building carbon budgeting capacity for the region as an organization. And of course, the region has made many investments in decarbonizing, for example, its transportation system and that sort of thing. So I think you'll see our environmental objectives reflected, and particularly around climate action, reflected in a whole bunch of different fronts.
And just kind of a follow-up question with that in terms of the private sector and the big businesses, and kind of if there's work happening collaboratively regarding addressing some of these issues in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions and the reduction.
Yeah, through you, I don't want to steal Ms. Rose's thunder here, but Transform WR was a collaborative project with hundreds of stakeholders across the community engaged in the process. And I know Sustainable Waterloo Region has actually got a lot of programming for the reduction of carbon requirements for businesses and industries, and with many, many partners across the region working on that.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think an important number to remember, and Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong on here, but 4 years ago, the lifetime span of the landfill site was 20 years. Now it's 25 years, if I'm not mistaken, and that is a signal of the waste reduction strategies we've been able to put in place. So we've extended that by 5 years.
Yep, through the chair, that is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
Thanks very much. Through you, Chair. Just curious about some of the carbon reduction initiatives with respect to energy use for regional buildings, and wondered if we have in place green development standards for buildings like new builds or retrofits when those happen.
Through the chair, I think that Rod would be the best one to answer that question. Or is it Craig? I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
I'm new.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'd be happy to have Rod answer the question. Through you, Mr. Chair, we build our new facilities to a LEED standard, and I think in most cases it's silver, and perhaps other cases to different standards. But we can certainly provide some information back to committee through the process if it's helpful about both the work that we do when we're constructing new facilities, as well as some of the investments we've made over the years with respect to energy efficiency at our buildings. We're happy to bring that information back.
Seeing no other questions, we'll continue with our presentations.
Good afternoon, Regional Council. My colleague Shuli and I are going to take the next few slides. So through you, Chair, permissible, we could both perhaps present and then open it for questions when we're both done. Does that work with you? So I'm going to walk through some service levels with respect to healthy, safe, and inclusive communities. And you'll see some numbers on here. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't ground this conversation, this part of the conversation. And of course, each one of these numbers represents a human being, a person living in our community. And while we talk about in this area that the people we often serve through some of these programs and services are sometimes the most vulnerable individuals in society living in the most precarious conditions that we can imagine. But there's also an imperative that when our vulnerable communities thrive, we all thrive. So as we think about the services that we provide to a specific segment of this community, we really do that through the lens of community building across this entire community that we all call home. There's a couple of areas here I'll touch on. You can see the first is our Ontario Works. So this is the program that we provide benefits through OW, as we call it, Ontario Works, and ODSP. You can see that any given month, at this point, we have about 15,000 individuals per month who are supported through this particular program. I didn't get into it here, but I can share with you that the current rates provided through this program are still below the poverty level, and this council many years ago, I don't know exactly when, but made a decision to include in our annual budget some discretionary benefits that our staff have the opportunity to support some of our community members over and above what is currently provided. You'll see the next areas are around our children's services, and the vast majority of the work that we do in this area is as the service system manager for licensed childcare in this community. And you can see that any given time we have about 3,000 families in this community that are accessing childcare through the use of a subsidy. For me personally, I had the opportunity to see firsthand through the pandemic what an incredibly essential service licensed childcare is in this community. It was not the sector that tended to get as much attention with that respect, but they, I know from firsthand experience, showed up for work every single day on the front lines of this community. High quality licensed childcare in this community is not only a path for family supports, but there's also an economic imperative and a gender equity imperative to this work. For those of you who are not familiar, we also happen to own and operate a seniors and long-term care facility here in the region of Waterloo at Sunnyside, one of the oldest homes in Ontario, which was new to me when I arrived here at the region. This is another area that, due to circumstance, has really operated in its own little environment through the pandemic. This is a group of people, there's about 500 staff who work at Sunnyside in seniors, And I can tell you for them, the pandemic is still very much a real thing. We continue to work through isolation and outbreaks, both COVID and now into flu season, and it is a very, very challenging environment. And these 500 people who work on behalf of the region and serve this community, and again, some of the most vulnerable people in this community do and have done and continue to do heroic work here in this community. There's a point here about some of our reconciliation and equity work, and you can see there are dozens and dozens of services that we are and initiatives across the region of Waterloo in all areas. And then as you heard over the past couple of weeks, just a reminder that not only are we doing reconciliation and equity work inside our walls, so to speak, we're also supporting a number of organizations, particularly some of the grassroots, and you had a chance to meet some of those folks last week. If I could have the next slide, please. And then the last two points that I will reference before I turn it over to my colleague Julie is around housing and our emergency shelter and supportive and transitional housing work. As you can see, and as we've talked a lot about already in these early days of this new council, we hold the privilege and the honor of being the service system manager for housing and homelessness in this community. It's a role that is fraught with difficulty. It is layered. It is complex, and it is a very, very challenging file. We have spent a significant amount of time unpacking and understanding and supporting and looking at ways to support our unsheltered population in this community that at last count exceeded 1,000 people. But we also do a significant amount of work on the housing side. And for every story that you hear here or out in the community about those experiencing homelessness and are actively and sometimes chronically homeless, there is a significant amount of work supporting people who are living precariously to help keep them in a safe place. And the work that we do across this community in that effort through partners, nonprofits, and co-ops is a significant piece. And I guess the thing that I would add before I turn it over to Julie is as you work your way through this process, and you'll hear my colleague Kim talk about our people, this is exceptionally difficult work. It has been made exceptionally more difficult through a pandemic, and we do know that in high empathy environments, issues of burnout and work-related trauma are high. You see that in the healthcare sector, and you see that across social services. So not only are we serving some of the most vulnerable people in this community, but we also are asking our staff to continue to show up to serve these people, and that is also having an impact on the quality of their work life and also our ability to show up like we need to. So I will pass that over to my colleague Julie.
Thank you, Peter. The provincially funded Ontario Seniors Dental Program for low-income seniors got started in 2022 through a partnership with our local community health centers. From January 1st to October the 1st, 418 clients received dental services through community health center dentists and or through referral to dental specialists. And 362 clients received preventative dental services by a registered dental hygienist at a community health center. Next slide, please. Paramedic services continues to experience increasing call volumes in line with a quickly growing as well as aging population. In our last regular report to Council, we had responded to over 55,000 calls year to date, that is from January 1st to October the 15th. This is expected to reach over 70,000 calls by year end, which would represent a 10% increase over 2021 call volumes. Prior to the pandemic deployment, Public Health also completed over 7,300 food premise inspections. And we also provided from over 4,800 to close to 8,700 vaccinations for each of the vaccines offered as part of our regular school immunization program. And finally, over 1,466,000 total doses of COVID-19 vaccine have been administered to Waterloo Region residents. Of that total, over 925,000 of them were administered through Region of Waterloo clinics. And finally, in 2022, we have also run clinics for 355 days of the year. That is all days except for 10. With that, Peter and I are happy to take any questions.
Chair Rudman.
Thank you, Chair Harris. This is sort of a global question I would ask both Peter and Shuli. I recognize this is a budget conversation, and I also recognize that need knows no boundaries, but I often get asked, and Peter, you talked about the discretionary grants, and there is a suspicion or an unease within the community that people come from outside of our region to access our services. And whether it's OW or it's shelter or it's those kinds of supports, can you just talk about if residency is a criteria and how we go about confirming that those are people that rightfully should be getting those services in the region of Waterloo?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I would actually have to ask the question around the OW, ODSP, around residency requirements. It's a provincially funded service, so I would have to go back and ask that and come back and clarify. I do know anecdotally that there are different rules in different jurisdictions and municipalities around OW, so if I could come back to you on that piece. Around the housing, the homelessness file in particular, it is something that I've heard, again, anecdotally question. I don't have any data, I haven't seen any data to support notions that there are a significant amount of individuals who are coming to this community to access our shelter system, for example. Again, we can go and dig into that as well, but the majority of folks that we serve, we have in some sort of system, but I would have to get you some data to be able to answer that more concretely if I can defer on that one.
Thank you very much. I just think that it is a bit of an urban legend, and I don't know, Shuli, from health services residency or how that is vetted, but I think it's a rumor I'd like to put to death or get clarified.
Will do.
Yes, I could say that in general, the programs that we're funded for really are provincial programs, so we don't have hard boundaries in terms of who we offer the service to. But if you take a look at our stats overall, in general, the vast majority are Waterloo Region residents, and when there are occasions when we take residents from outside the region, like, for example, during the vaccine rollout, a similar proportion are taken by other areas for our residents.
Councillor James.
Hi, thank you. Through you, Chair Harris. Just a couple of questions around the Ontario Seniors Dental Care Program. What is the criteria? And in terms of the 2022 numbers compared to pre-pandemic, have we seen and have you seen an increase? Just want to see the comparable as we know seniors right now are really struggling.
Through you, the Chair. Thank you, Councillor James, for those questions. For the second one, I'll go ahead and respond right away. And for the first one, I'll defer to our director who oversees this program, Grace Birmingham. She's online. So this is the first, 2022 is actually the first year that this program is operating. And it's also operating right now in 2 of our CHCs. Earlier, or I should say later on, towards the second half of the year, I believe, we got approval to do capital renovations to our 3rd CHC in order to enable that program to be opened. I believe it's 2024. But I'll hand it over to Grace, and she can correct me if I'm wrong on any of the things I said. Thank you.
Through you, Chair Harris. Shuli, you're correct. This is the first full year of operations with respect to this program. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. And in terms of the eligibility question, so the program criteria that needs to be met for seniors to be eligible for this program includes being 65 years of age or older, being a resident of Ontario, having an annual net income of $22.2 thousand or less for a single person, or a combined annual net income of $37.1 thousand per couple, and having no access to any other form of dental benefits, including private insurance or through government programs such as the ODSP support program, Ontario Works, or the non-insured health benefit. So those are the eligibility requirements in terms of this program.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Harris, through you. It's with respect to, a question with respect to the housing services and our affordable housing stock. So a question I have is with respect to condition and maintenance levels, and whether we get regular reports with respect to that, and whether you, Commissioner Sweeney, are satisfied that we're meeting whatever standards we have set with respect to our housing stock.
Thank you, Councillor Deutschman. Just to clarify, when you say do we receive reports, does council receive specific reports on the conditions? Is that what you're asking, or do we as regional staff? Just
Staff.
So I can answer your question.
My question was specific to staff.
Yeah, so absolutely. There are condition audits made regularly. We have a multi-year capital plan in combination with our colleagues in facilities. I can tell you that in my early days here at the region, I haven't spent nearly as much time digging into the housing side of this portfolio. I've been kind of busy on the homelessness side of this portfolio, and I'm actually starting over the next couple of weeks to do some site tours. So I think I would prefer to come back at a later state to share with you what I'm seeing, but I do know that there's a significant amount of investment made in our Waterloo Region housing stock. And that we have some that I think we can be really proud of, and we probably have some other units where we've got some work to do.
Yeah, just on that, if there are tours, I'd be interested in participating in tour as well.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through the chair, here I am, the cheerleader again, but staff, you're doing an amazing job in all departments. I'm really proud of what you're doing. You know, Peter, you've come into a not good situation, and press has been brutal, but your staff have been amazing. I wish everybody had come to the housing forum. You wouldn't have believed, you would have been blown away what a great job our staff are doing. And it's not perfect. None of us are perfect. Matthew, coming on board, you're so open and positive. Jennifer, it's wonderful. I love the report you did on water that I could give to the AMO group to take to the subcommittee in regards to Bill 23. We all should be very, very proud of our staff. I'm done cheerleading. Go.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things. The Ontario Works said the statement is providing financial support and benefits to 15,000 individuals monthly on average. And the comment, of course, that this is below the poverty line. Can we get a better picture of what that means? I mean, it's something you sort of skirt over and you move on to the next item. I'm interested in what the impact is on certain populations that are getting those benefits or lack of proper benefits so that we can have a look at it, because I find it very concerning in terms of what I'm hearing out there. My second question, I'm giving you all the easy questions today. It's about the emergency shelter and the number of spaces and the hybrid plans we have out in Wilmot. Now, I wasn't on the last council to understand fully where this is all going. But if in fact we build more hybrid camps in the region of Waterloo, which are like the better tent city, that's the best analogy, and I might add, across North America, we're seeing these units going up everywhere, which I think is really really reflects back on staff and what they're trying to do. Would that not then preclude having shelters altogether to move people off the street right into these units?
So through you, Chair, Councillor Craig, I appreciate the easy questions to start, so I'll just say that. If I could start with the OW piece, I'm actually going to go back to Chair Redmond's comment, and I have confirmed that, yes, you indeed have to have a Waterloo Regional address to access OW and ODSP, so just to clarify that piece. My comment around the poverty line, I would be happy to come back and ask our leadership team to come back at an appropriate time, in an appropriate form, for some information, education around that. But I can give you an example. The base OW support for an individual is $733 a month. The poverty line is multiples of that. But I'm happy to bring back some context in terms of, as you can imagine, whether you're a single, whether you're in a family unit, whether you have children. So it's hard to make a blanket statement, but I'm happy to bring back some of that information. Your second question is also a good one. I guess I'll go back to the intent of the interim housing plan, of which the outdoor shelter that we announced the location for yesterday is just that. It's part of a larger interim housing plan as we also start the incredibly important work to put together an action plan to actually end chronic homelessness in this community. To go to a place where we would only offer shelter, temporary housing, transitional housing in the model that we announced yesterday to the exclusion of what I will call traditional shelters. I don't envision that. You may have already read or heard some of the community feedback about the location of this the first hybrid shelter as it's relative to the downtown cores. You can see in the report there we have over 600 beds in this system, all of which most people I think would be in or near the cores of our communities. So 50 beds in the outdoor shelter represents less than 10% of that total. So that's for context. But to answer your specific question, no, I don't see that this is something that would replace. And before we make any decisions or recommendations to operate a second or a third one of these, although we think and been pretty transparent that might be necessary, and we would be looking across the region to do that if so. We'd like to get this one up and running and learn a few things before we go to the next one. So that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but did I hit all your key points?
Yeah, for sure. Mr. Chairman, if I may just continue for a moment here. So if in fact, what I'm hearing when I talk to people who are in the sort of very much immersed in looking at helping people, what I'm hearing is that these temporary situations then become permanent because people see them as a community. Okay, Better Tent City is an example of that. And some other commentary I've heard about what we're doing may in fact end up being permanent. Do you have any response to that, I hope?
Yes, I do. In fact, this came up very early on in even the early discussions about whether this particular offering should even be included. Because of that, the notion that temporary things often become permanent things. And, my response then 6 months ago is the same as it is today. I think it's incumbent upon us as staff, you as council to keep asking questions, and our partners in our community to work really, really hard that this actually is indeed an interim program offering, and it's also interim for the people accessing it. Because if we're doing our job well, we are helping people get stabilized, people who are currently living in what most people consider really unsafe environments, help them and unhealthy, help them get stable, access the services they need, and support them on a pathway to more permanent supportive housing.
Just a last question. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. But this is all predicated, of course, on proper affordable housing or supportive housing, whatever we want to label it. And we don't seem to have the monies coming in our direction from federal and provincial authorities. Are you concerned about that?
Councillor Craig, if you find us the money and do that part, we'll take care of the rest.
Right. I'll work on it.
Thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
I just wanted to go back to the dental program. I'm just wondering if there's any sense of what the federal government's doing with that potential the dental program, and if that will impact what we're doing through the region.
I'll ask Grace Birmingham to respond. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair Harris, and thank you for the question. The federal program right now is currently eligible for families with children under the age of 12. This is an interim program that's being rolled out until we understand a permanent program will be developed. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of detail about what that permanent program will entail, but as we do, we'll be happy to give an update.
Thank you.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you. This question would be either for Grace or Shuli, again on the dental program. I just wanted clarification. Is it at the regional level or the provincial level that we find dentists that actually take this form of program? I'm wondering specifically, I know in the rural areas, those that are below the poverty line, it's really difficult for them to get to the few sites that are in town, and we don't have transit that some of them are able to get to.
Grace, you okay with responding to that as well?
Yeah, through you, Chair Harris. With respect to the dental programs for low-income families, there's a number of different programs that the region administers, and they are provincially funded. One is the Healthy Smiles Ontario program, and that's typically the one that families with low incomes access, and that's prior to the federal program rolling out. So with respect to the new federal program, that will be a benefit that families can receive directly and will enable them to use towards dental support with any dentist that's available to them. With respect to the HSO program, those dentists would be contacted and contracted through the region to get that support. We are always looking to expand the number of dental providers through this program. And because the HSO funding formula is lower than what would be market value, this can be a struggle, but we're always eager to work with new dental partners in order to provide accessibility.
So in sum, it is a provincial program, but yes, it does require voluntary participation from the dentists in our areas, and we continue to make efforts to try to recruit as many dentists as we can to help roll out this program. But as Grace mentioned, the rates are set provincially, and they are not very high.
That's great. And may I do a follow-up question as well? Thank you very much, Shuli and Grace, for that. This is now going to the seniors. Just wondering, I know that it said striving for 4 hours of care. How is that comparable to other facilities? As well as, I wanted to know, I know as recently as 2 years ago, provincially, seniors who were in facilities that were getting funded through the province and weren't paying privately, they were only getting up to 2 incontinence diapers a day, despite the actual need. So I think there's a dignity issue there, and I just want to make sure as we're looking at budget that the people in our facility certainly aren't facing that, and we have enough budget to make sure it's on a need basis, not a that's all that you get for the day.
So through you, Chair, I appreciate that. I wasn't aware of the incontinence piece. I'm certainly, I will ask. Our current director of seniors is under the weather this week. The 4 hours of care is a new bundle of funding that is coming into the system. It's good news. It's significantly good news. We are very, very fortunate to be one of the only long-term care facilities in Ontario, actually, that has yet to, despite our many, many human resource challenges, has yet to be forced into bringing an agency model in. So we're doing everything we can to avoid that as much as possible. It comes with significant additional costs. And the hours of funding also provides an opportunity for us to shift the needle a bit between full-time and part-time, which is also very helpful in a very challenging health services workforce crisis, actually. So I will get back to you on the second question, though, again. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Just a heads up, we do have a Board of Health meeting today at 4:30, and I know there's some significant presentations still left. So, and then we've got closed and council, so we're going to keep her moving if we can, everyone. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and both to Peter and Shuli, just like to thank you and your staff for all you're doing. I look at the OW rates, I look at child vaccination. Other than not cutting your budgets, how can this council best help you?
Wow. So OW and ODSP, Councillor Wolf, are mandated, those rates are mandated through the provincial government. There was an adjustment to the ODSP rates of 5%. There was zero adjustment to the Ontario Works rates. I've mentioned some figures that are, relative to the challenges that people face in this community. Councillor Craig talked about the role that you play as municipal councillors in intergovernmental conversations. Those would certainly help. This is a very challenging environment for all of us to work in. And I can tell you in community services, many of the people we support access multiple services. There's an intersectionality of income disparity in this community. And I think if I had to get to the root cause of some of the challenges that we face, it really is around income equity. And I don't have a good answer better than, certainly more funding would be ideal on many levels, but we also have to be thinking about systemically, how are we addressing and supporting folks who have multiple challenges that they're working through. So that's the best I can answer today, short of a big bag of cash, please.
Councillor Urbanovic.
Thank you for the I was wondering if a motion from the council to the provincial government asking for increased funding, stating exactly some of the problems. Councillor Deutschman's very good at all the whereases, so on a motion we could fill pages, I'm sure. But, the pressure there might help. Anyway, but I do think that both your departments, when we were on the election circuit, from constituents, they saw that health and housing and poverty were their greatest concerns. And I do think it should be ours as a council, and from what I'm hearing, it is. So anything that we can do with a limited budget, I think we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Urbanovic.
Thank you. Just further to the issue of dental care that we were talking about earlier, I'm just wondering if there's any models across the province or elsewhere where, in fact, the municipality has, instead of contracting with dental professionals, has actually looked at bringing them on staff themselves. So I think of, facilities management, as an example, we reach a point where, after a certain number of hours, electricians, plumbers, those kinds of things, it's better to have them on staff than to contract it out. Similarly, we know in Dr. Wong's department that we have, medical professionals who prefer not to be in private practice, but rather would work for a municipality like us. And we have lots of incredible people that have been part of our team in terms of nurses and others. And so I'm just wondering if that's a model that's been looked at and could perhaps allow us to deliver more service at a more effective cost. Yeah.
Grace, would you like to take a crack at that question? I think there are specific requirements or parameters, I should say, set by the province for these programs that are rolled out locally, including how they pay dentists and things like that.
Yeah, so through you, Chair Harris, it's a really good question. With respect to the models that we have with ODP, those are pretty much prescribed in terms of how that program is expected to roll out. And the partnership that we have with our local community health centers is one that is very much supported by the province. And in those situations, there is an ability to contract specialists through that model, with the primary services being provided by our partners at the CHC. With respect to the Healthy Smiles Ontario dentistry program, so this is a program that, as I said before, is targeted to families who meet income eligibility requirements. And those are offered actually both in partnership with our community providers, in addition to dentists that we do hire through contracts with the region. So we actually have a hybrid model, so to speak. And I said, it is the partnership with the community folks that we would. We're always looking to expand our partnerships with respect to that, really just to improve accessibility and ensure that families have access to a dental provider that could be their home dental provider and is accessible to them and close to where they live.
Sorry, I'll just add that we do regularly look at what type of model would be most efficient and also be able to, deliver services in an accessible way for all of our residents. It likely for the dental program services, it likely, or to date, is not a program in which this is often considered like full-time work for many dentists, and so I think we do use a combination, like Grace mentioned, a hybrid model where we can, but it's something that we'll continue to review. Thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll continue with our presentations.
Through you, Chair Harris. So I'd just like to provide a bit of information about our economic development, or under the theme of thriving economy. We take very much a holistic approach to economic development at the region of Waterloo. This is an effort that is full court press for some of our team, working with our area municipal colleagues, with Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, and our private sector partners, our institutional partners, and our not-for-profit partners. You'll see under this theme a variety of perhaps surprising concepts, such as, for example, the engagement of youth, Smart Waterloo Region investments, our view that housing is part of the economic development or a thriving economy, and so on. So I'd just like to walk through this very briefly with you. So speaking of housing, we had a lot of progress under the region's Building Better Futures initiative. We have about 1,150 units under development, and about 200 of those are actually occupied already. We're doing anticipating some work, studying the region's requirements for shovel-ready land for employment purposes. You'll recall that our regional official plan review that we undertook completed earlier this year identified the need for a significant amount of employment land to support industrial employment in the Waterloo region. And we brought in, as a result of that, approximately 450 hectares of land, which will start the planning process on over the next little while as well. Next slide, please. So, of course, I think in our current strategic plan, the airport is the number one, or the first objective. Council has given us a mandate to work diligently at the development of air service and the aeronautical industries around the airport. We've seen very significant success in this regard, with growth in our passenger volumes in the last 24 months, a very significant growth. In fact, I think we're the fastest growing airport in the country in terms of passengers, and one of the top 5 or 10 in North America. We're also seeing significant employment growth at the airport. I think we're at about 500 jobs at the airport right now, with new hangars and new facilities being contemplated by our private sector partners as we speak. Of course, this slide also speaks to our library resources. The pandemic was a significant challenge for our libraries, as it was for all of our services. And we continued to, we took advantage of that pandemic to reinvent many of our services as digital services, which helped us consolidate, maintain a service to our patrons and keep information and books flowing in the region. Next slide, please. And another component of the planning, development, and legislative services team works at our museums. Pre-pandemic, we had about 100,000 visitors at our 4 regional museum sites. The pandemic did a lot of damage to that, of course, as it did to all walk-in services across the region. But we're in the process now of rebuilding our not only our audience, but also the services and that we provide to the community through our museums. And of course, it provides a very important resource in terms of the objects that we're responsible for stewarding, and we take that work very seriously. Next slide, please. And I just want to speak very briefly about our planning work here. The region has seen record levels of development over the last 3 years. Approximately 6,000 new homes developed, pulled building permits in 2021. We've seen significant investments in industrial infrastructure, industrial space in the region. That's all facilitated by the planning work that we do here at the region. Our policy, data research and analytics team supported a major review of our regional official plan last year, which is over the last couple of years, which is what I referred to earlier. Our development planning team has seen approximately 40% increase in development applications that they've been handling over the last couple of years, which is significant growth and provides for a very optimistic view of the future for the region, in my view. And our environmental planning and sustainability team has been working really diligently with our private sector partners, our not-for-profit partners, the rest of the organization as a whole to manage our response to the environmental challenges that we're dealing with. And I'd like to also put a shout out to our corridor planning team, which manages access to regional roads across the region, without which we would end up having a few more complicated traffic situations evolve in the future. So with that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Yes, Councillor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much, Chair Harris, and thanks for the presentation, Mr. Regier. Just on this slide in particular, obviously there's significant chunks here based on Bill 23 that will potentially see some transition happening going forward. And I'm not looking for the answer to this today, obviously. And in fact, some of it probably should be dealt with at the appropriate time in camera. But I guess what I'd be interested in is a better understanding of how we are going to be planning for this transition, and most importantly, the work that we're going to be doing with our municipal partners, because in my mind, we have some really great professionals here at the region, and I certainly would want to see that as many as possible of those individuals, if transitions need to happen, there's opportunities for them at our local municipalities, and we don't see that going elsewhere. And so I just flag that as I think a conversation we'll need to have at some point, and be able to really, as soon as possible, ensure there's certainty there for folks. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Wolf.
Through the chair, I was wondering about your airport stats. It says you're estimated 600,000 for passengers in 2023. How many would we have in 2022?
Through you, Chair Harris, we're looking at just short of about 400,000 right now for 2022. And to put that in perspective, I think we were at around 200, if I'm not mistaken, 2021 was about 251,000, and the year before that was about just over 50,000. So we're seeing very significant levels of growth in passenger activity there.
And the follow-up, how dependent are we on Flair Airlines?
Flair is a major portion of that business growth. We have seen very high levels of passengers retained by WestJet. WestJet continues to provide a daily service to Calgary through YKF, but Flair would account for probably 80% of the growth there. Just so you're aware, we're continuing to be in conversation with other airlines as well, because we think that the Waterloo region and YKF present a really good value proposition for other airlines to provide services across North America.
Thank you.
Councillor James.
Hi, thank you. Through you, Chair Harris. Just a couple of questions about revenue generation. I'm thinking about the museum in particular. What are the, and this may be something you report back to us in terms of the numbers based on revenue from renting out the museum. Similarly, it's under Matthew, I'm going to pull you in here. Similarly with some of the advertising, I'm thinking of our transit, the stops. What type of revenue are we seeing from that? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair Harris, we do see some, although the revenue has been dramatically affected by COVID. The museum at Dune, for example, has been a very popular wedding destination, which is a commercial venture for us, and so we do have opportunities at the museums for additional revenue. However, it's going to require a little bit of investment on our part to fully optimize that opportunity, capitalize on that opportunity.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions. We'll move to the, oh, sorry, follow up, my bad.
Through the chair, I can give I don't have the number off the top of my mind on advertising on transit, but it is, I think as part of the business plan that we'll bring to you this year, we'd like also to share a bit of a wide range of other revenue generating opportunities, whether it's through advertising or through partnerships with others. So these are definitely things that are in the scope of what we're looking at, and we can bring that back to you.
Okay, we'll continue on. Mr. Dyer.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For every public-facing service, there is a team of staff who, behind the scenes, quietly help to enable that service and support that service to be delivered across the region. That includes individuals who are working in our facilities and fleet group, within information technology services, within finance, within legal, within human resources, and other areas. I'm just going to touch on a couple of those on this slide. So first of all, we have a facilities and fleet group that between them are looking after over 800 regional buildings and almost 800 800 vehicles, which would range from police cruisers to ambulances to snowplows to pickup trucks to the heavy equipment that works at our landfill site and everywhere in between. Buildings include office buildings such as the one we're in right now, as well as hundreds of housing units and water and wastewater plants and ambulance stations and police stations and all of the other facilities that are needed in order to deliver regional services. The finance team, among other things, processes approximately 165,000 invoices annually, billing 4,500 water customers, and that group provides the procurement and financial analysis and management that is befitting a $1.5 billion corporation with a AAA credit rating. In the legal area, we have, through our provincial offences court administration, processing over 50,000 charges over the course of the year, which includes about 5,500 red light camera, and as previously indicated, over approximately 20,000 automated speed enforcement infractions. Within our IT group, a number of course, very important responsibilities there, starting with security and maintaining the safety and security of our applications, of our data that is used across the region, supporting hundreds of applications on almost 1,000 servers, and thousands of individual connected devices, including buses and other vehicles, transportation, traffic cameras, alarms, building access, and a number of others, just to name a few here. So an important part an important part of the region's service delivery, captured with all the individuals in these areas. And with that, I'll turn it over to Connie to conclude.
Thanks, Craig. A significant part of our efforts to deliver responsive and engaging public services is focused on supporting, engaging, and informing the 630,000 residents that live in our communities. One of the ways that we're working to make it easier for residents to access services and information is through the Service First Contact Center, a 24/7 operation that responds to more than 300,000 calls and emails annually. We also provide in-person service at 3 of our administrative buildings. Our current service level standard is that 80% of calls are answered within 60 seconds. You know, through the pandemic, the Service First Call Center has been such an incredible resource for residents, with increased call volumes, providing that one-stop place for residents looking for regional information. As we work to modernize and improve our resident service, next year we'll be expanding our service channels to provide an AI-enabled chatbot on the website with interactive virtual agents. Another way in which we're working to help residents is through communications and engagement. At our last meeting, we talked about the different ways that the region engages community and how we're working to evolve our engagement practices to new ways that elevate voices not traditionally heard. We also continue to use online engagement methods such as our Engage platform with almost 10,000 subscribers. Throughout the year, the region also hosts a number of large engagement events across services to help inform program and service delivery. The region's communications team shares information and engages with residents through a number of different channels, including through web, print, social, and traditional media. Our online engagement continues to grow with 11,000 web visitors this year and more than 80,000 social followers. Well, these are some of our more traditional communications channels. A big part of what our communications team does is look at the unique individual needs of residents in receiving information and accessing services and helping to come up with new ways to support them in receiving that information. In some cases, it's, working on, different ways of sharing information in different languages through different platforms. Most recently, recognizing that the way in which we communicate as an organization may not resonate with all residents, we've launched a new Storyteller in Residence program, where we've brought in a member of the community to listen, learn, and then share back in a way that is more meaningful for those living in the community to better understand the different services that the region provides. The team also works closely with local media partners who are absolutely critical in helping residents stay informed. This year, the team will have facilitated upwards of 3,000 media stories. That's across television, web, radio, and print media. And of course, the team also works internally to help staff stay informed with an internal staff portal, staff newsletter, and ongoing communications to support staff. With that, I'll pause for any questions on this for either Craig or I.
Yeah, thanks for that thorough analysis and information about the various communication pieces. I'm just curious about how you help citizens and residents understand the who does what piece, like the local municipalities versus regional, because we certainly, at the Speak for the City of Waterloo, our councillors and our staff receive a lot of information or a lot of questions that are actually for regional programs. So I'm wondering if you could just share some information about how or what we could be doing to kind of help them understand a little bit more who does what and where to direct questions.
Thanks for the question, and through the chair. This is the ultimate question. I've worked at different levels of government, and I think from a philosophical standpoint, we all work together to support the resident regardless of which level of government provides the service. And so I'm grateful to our partners at other levels of government, including the area municipalities and our provincial and federal partners, who we work, pretty frequently behind the scenes to help support residents in transitioning to the right level of government for support. That said, most of our communications materials do try to outline the different roles and different services that we might provide versus an area municipality versus the provincial government. I would say it's very complex, even for those of us that work in different levels of government, and helping residents understand that is something I think we can all continue to work on with a focus on making it as easy as possible for those that we serve.
Councillor James.
Hi, thank you through you, Chair Harris, and thank you, Connie, for this. Just have a question regarding the communication, and you mentioned, communication being offered in various different languages, et cetera. Is that, with our Service First call or contact center, is there additional languages being offered for residents when they call in? Is that something being considered or expanded on in terms of responding and engaging with community?
I might defer that question to my colleague, Kim Bellissimo.
Thank you, Connie, and thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. So the call center provides a 7/24 service. They very much respond to questions from the residents, specifically around things like, when does my garbage get picked up, and will the plow be by soon, right through to how do I book a vaccine appointment. So it's a very diverse list. They operate in multiple languages, and they're very much focused on trying to make sure they can respond to the question of the moment or defer to the appropriate expert in order to provide the additional information.
And just a follow-up question in terms of, the number of languages, like just having some of that context and information in terms of what languages are available. I don't think that is readily communicated in the messaging with just what languages are being offered.
Thank you for that. We'll take that back and find a way to better communicate that to the community.
Don't have any other questions if you want to continue on.
Okay. Thank you, and through you, Chair Harris. So our people, no surprise, this is my favorite topic. So we have about 3,700 employees that work here at the region of Waterloo, and we are responsible for helping them through what we call the employee life cycle. From the time we engage them in potentially being an employee of the organization, through to onboarding, training, supporting their promotion and development, right through to when they opt to retire from this organization. And we have many people who've worked with us for many, many years, and we're pleased to be able to create that enabling support for them. What we're really trying to do is help them build and grow their career here and really enable them to thrive at the region. And that's what we focus on every day. As many of you are well aware, we are no different than any other employer in this province, in this country, and in the global world. We all experience post-pandemic issues associated with mental health concerns, lack of resiliency, and frankly, burnout. So we launched a very comprehensive well-being program with a whole bunch of pillars that was very much focused on ensuring our staff could be resilient and support the creation of ongoing high-performing team performance. The emergency management team, in addition to supporting 45 regional responses, as indicated in this slide, also were really instrumental in helping both the region, the local area municipalities, EMS services, and even local businesses respond to the pandemic. They were doing that for many years, helped to facilitate and coordinate responses and ensure appropriate information was being shared so everyone could respond at their particular level. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this list is really all about what we're trying to achieve. I call this what we're doing to build the workplace of the future. Our focus is ensuring that we don't have a workplace for today, but we have a workplace that allows everyone who comes to this organization to be able to have a great employee experience and an opportunity for, again, them to build their career here and an opportunity for them to have a diverse work experience, both interesting and challenging. We're very much focused on a few key areas. We want to create a diverse, inclusive, and harmonious workplace. We're focused on delivering exceptional customer service. We actually believe that if we have happy, motivated, and engaged employees, they will be inclined to provide great service to our community. We create a safe environment, not just for our employees, but for the residents. We're very much focused, even in this very challenging period, on attracting and retaining the best for the region of Waterloo. We're working hard to create an exceptional employee experience. We're developing high-performing people leaders. We all know the reason why people leave their place of employment. It's usually their boss. So we're working very hard to build that capacity. And ultimately, we're enabling the region to be able to deliver robust services and deliver on our ambitious goals. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Seeing none, if you want to carry on. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kim. That concludes the first portion of the presentation, overview of service levels. The next portion, I will be turning it over to my colleague, Mr. Dyer, to speak to the service expansion and capital program elements.
Excuse me. Thank you so much. And given the time, which I understand we have until about 4:30. To complete this. I'm going to skip through a little bit of this and jump right to the end. This is a little bit risky, but there's just a couple of diagrams that I want to show you in hopes that this is going to be helpful. We'll cover the capital program in some detail when we get back together in January. But I did want to describe this. It's not quite coming in the way I was hoping it would. So I'm actually going to skip over this until next time, and I'm going to focus on.
Ideally, 4:30 is the next, but I mean, this is the important, they're all important pieces, but this is a integral piece, so you take the time that you need.
Yep. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So I may bounce around to a couple of slides here, but I'll try to keep it focused. We had some discussion last time about the region's budget, kind of where we were at. We continue to work away on the 2023 budget. I understand that. In some cases at area municipalities this week, preliminary budgets were presented. We're not quite at that stage yet. We certainly anticipate being there in the very early part of January. But I thought just maybe a little bit more context about the property tax bill its components and how those components change and then translate into an overall tax bill for the upcoming year. So I'll be curious to know whether this particular slide is helpful. And I'm going to start with this. So you may recall in our initial discussion at the orientation session back in November, we talked about the overall components of a residential tax bill, which is the pie chart that you see on the left-hand side here. So what we would say is, on average, a household in Waterloo Region's tax bill would be approximately 54% for the region, 32% for the local municipality, and 14% for education. And it's not an exact number. It's actually it's an average number because the local municipality share will vary from municipality to municipality. But on average, we can say this. So of the overall average tax bill in 2022 of just over $4,000, about 54% of that is for the region. So that's step number one. Then step number two is, of that 54%, this is where the math gets just a little tricky, 68%, a little over 2/3 of that 54% represents direct, what we refer to as direct regional services, essentially non-police, all the services excluding police. And so what we see here is about 68% of the upper tier portion relates to regional services, and then 32% relates to the police. And of course, as we discussed the other time, police go through their own budget approval process as outlined in the Police Services Act, and then that budget will eventually make its way to Regional Council. So what we've been talking about, the 9.8% number that we used back on November 30th applies to the 68% of that 54%. So about 2/3 of 54 is going to be, is the portion of the tax bill that we're working with here. Obviously not the local municipal share, obviously not the education share. The province sets the education tax rates. Local municipalities will determine the levy and taxes for local services, and this council will do the rest. And so that 9.8% applies to a portion of that upper tier part of the bill. And so if we look at the overall upper tier portion of that bill, a 9.8%, the $147 for an average household, if you look at the total upper tier, is about 6.7% increase on the upper tier portion of the bill. And to that, we would then add the police budget once that budget makes its way through its process. So I hope that's helpful. I thought it just might be useful just to, again, see what the overall bill was like and the portion of the bill that we're actually dealing with through this budget, which is about 2/3 of the upper tier portion. Just to bounce back, just one here. I'll just try this. Again, it's coming in a little bit strange. I often get asked, to try to describe in plain, simple language why there's so much pressure on municipal tax rates. And so, in its simplest form, the tax rate is simply a fraction, right? It's the levy, it's the amount of property taxes that we need to deliver services divided by the assessment base that we have within the region. All the residential, multi-residential, commercial, industrial, and other properties that we have. So we need X amount of dollars to run regional services. We have X amount of property assessment over which to levy those services, and that gives us the property tax rate. And so what we're experiencing, and notably so in 2023, is a situation where the numerator, the levy, is increasing at a rate significantly higher than the assessment base, right? So we talked about roughly a 10% levy increase last time, about $50 million, sorry, 11 or 12%, about $50 million. Operating costs are increasing because of inflation and cost escalation and service expansion and transformational investments. Our user fees, grants, and subsidies are growing not at the same rate. So in fact, on the subsidy side, as we talked about with the Social Services Relief Fund, not only are we adding costs for certain services, but in some cases, the revenue that we've relied on over the last few years is now disappearing. So we have costs going up. In some cases, we have revenues going down, and we have a significant impact on our capital funding. Again, with respect to capital cost escalation, the need to keep our assets in a state of good repair, and to build assets in order to accommodate growth in the community. And so on the numerator side, we have an 11 or 12% increase. On the denominator, we have 2% assessment growth. And that kind of simply put is why we see such a significant impact on the budget, on property taxes going into 2023. So I hope that provides just a little bit of a context as we start our journey through this 2023 budget. And I should say, we will provide some additional information on the assessment base and assessment growth at the Administration Finance Committee meeting in January. And so with that, Mr. Chair, just a couple of reminders. Again, in terms of why we believe this is a very different kind of budget than we've had over the last number of years. It's partly due to inflation and capital cost escalation, partly due to service expansion within paramedic services, within transit, within homelessness programs, and with the airport expansion, just to name a few. And of course, the expectations from the community of the services that the region's going to deliver and the problems that we're going to solve. And then, of course, homelessness programs and the expiry of the Provincial Social Services Relief Fund. For me, those three factors are what makes this budget a very different one than in the past. And then from a process perspective, we're starting to work our way through this. The second, this being the second meeting of the Strategic Planning and Budget Committee, we'll turn our minds now to getting the preliminary budget into its final form, and that will be part of our deliverable in advance of the January 18th committee meeting. And at that meeting, we intend to work through all of the different focus areas, talk about where services are being expanded, talk about both operating and capital budget implications. There's lots of discussion today about user fees. So we'll talk about that when we get to the 18th as well. The intent of that day would be to take let's say a bit of a deeper dive into the various regional services and the various drivers of the 2023 budget. We'll also then have our first public meeting on the budget on the evening of January 18th, and then we'll move through the rest of the process in February. I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Urbanovic.
Thanks very much. And I guess the one question I have has to do with the police budget, and it's something that I've been. It's kind of been bugging me for a while, and it's the fact that we actually separate that out. And my understanding is that happened, and maybe Councillor Craig might remember. I think it happened before my time. It definitely happened before my time around this horseshoe. I think it was maybe around 10 years ago that it was split out, and I'm not sure that that's the case in other municipalities. either single tier or two tier. And, you know, I'd compare it to a municipal budget, for example. You know, the three urban budgets have libraries as an example in our budget. That budget is determined by a separate board. Council either approves it or doesn't approve it. The only thing that's different is there's no provincial body to appeal it to. Similarly, in the City of Kitchener's case, we also have the Centre and the Square budget. It's approved by a separate board. Council either approves it or doesn't approve it. But we don't separate those out. They're all just part of the overall regional municipal budget in those cases. And so I'm just trying to understand why we're not just keeping it all together, because at the end of the day, it's a regional service and it impacts the regional portion of the budget. So I'm wondering if you can help me understand it.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's mostly just a question of responsibility for service delivery and service levels. So leaving aside the police budget for the moment, every service that is delivered by the region, the service level and the associated budget and resourcing to achieve that service level is established by this council. And the responsibility for the police budget resides, from a service level perspective, resides with the board. And they're working through their own process. You know, we don't have their number really at this point, and that's a process for them to go through. There are other areas such as, I'm trying to give a good example here, the MPAC board, for example, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. That is a separate board, it establishes its own budget, and they tell us exactly what our contribution will be. We have no say on that. We know what that number is, and that and that will be part of what we'll show in January. The challenge, I think, with the police budget is that they'll still be working through their process in January as we put our budget together and as this budget committee considers, various regional service levels. So I think, once we have a final number for the police, then absolutely, like we show it as a full package. We tried to show that, I think just here, if I can just go back. Right, so we have, again, here we have the region's share and the police share of that budget. I'm actually not sure what we would do differently at this point in our budget process.
Yeah, I guess, again, and I'm going to leave it for today and maybe come back to this. It's not, our library situation is not really different. Our Centre in the Square situation in terms of the City of Kitchener is not really different. And we always just look at it in the context of the city's budget. And so it does make me, wonder if we just should not be looking at it as a complete service envelope and not splitting it out. But I'll leave it for today. Thank you.
Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Harris, through you. Commissioner Dyer, or Mr. Dyer, so are we to say it's a 9.8% tax increase, or are we supposed to say it's a 6.7% tax increase? Because I don't recall this sort of presentation previously, but I appreciate what you're saying. But what are we supposed to do with that information as representatives when people in the community are asking us where are we at on this tax increase? Am I saying 9.8% is the regional portion, or I'm saying it's only 6.7%?
So the figure that's the most, that's mathematically the most appropriate right now is the 9.8%. Now, that's not a position that staff are recommending. We continue to work on that, and that'll obviously be updated when we bring this forward in January. And so I think again, what we're trying to show as in the most transparent way possible is, what is the impact on regional services, right? Like excluding the police portions, what we're saying here is that for all regional services, the impact is, say, 9.8%. The police will go through their process. They will establish a budget increase. We'll put that together to show what an overall tax bill is. But I think at this point, focusing on what's showing here as the upper or the green portion of that stacked bar, I think that's what this budget committee should focus on at this point. As soon as we have the police numbers and we have an approved budget, we can put that together and tell you what the overall impact is for the region's component of the budget.
I don't disagree that we have to focus on what we can control or deal with, but I was just confused why we were showing it at 6.7%. I'm not quite clear what the purpose of that percentage was with respect to your presentation.
Oh, it
we were
was
talking about 9.8% previously.
Right.
It's still, at the end of the day, it's $147.
Right. Yes.
And I always like to use
perhaps that's the most appropriate way to show it in the future.
Right, and I when I talk to people, I always use the real dollars.
Fair enough.
Say, well, it's $147. That's the total.
Yep.
Sometimes percentages get a little bit confused or scared because of the extent of it, but what is it in actual dollars? Now, appreciate it's in the context of everything else, mortgage rates going up and water services going up and area municipality increases and other things in school boards. So, but, okay, I was just wasn't, I kind of know what you were trying to do, but I wasn't 100% sure what you were trying to show there. But anyway, 147 is the number that we're working with and whittling down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. And just to remind everyone that this is the projected. We haven't got to the nitty gritty yet. And our input will affect the end result. Also, it's the 9.8% without the brought in of the new homes that have been built. And so it drops down to 6.7. I know that happens in our township.
I wish.
No? Okay. It was a nice try.
It was a very nice try, and I commend you for it. The 9.8% already takes into account the assessment growth.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
Thanks. Through you, Chair. If this is a question so much as just a comment that was raised from a local housing stakeholder for our consideration, was that given that, like locally in the city of Waterloo and then also at the region of Waterloo, we're looking at tax increases in, certainly higher range. And what the stakeholder pointed out to me is that the Residential Tenancies Act allows landlords to apply for rent increases above the guideline when there's in 3 different occasions. And one of them was when there's an extraordinary increase in the cost of municipal taxes. So for a residential complex or building in which the residential or the rental unit is located. So, and he raised this with me because it looks like certainly we're going to be in that, and that baseline is 3.75% increase. So I'm concerned, and I think, I don't know if this has been something that staff are thinking about, but are the increases that we're looking at from our own property tax increases, and I get there's significant pressures, like, don't get me wrong, I fully understand that, but us increasing the taxes the way that we're projecting to do so may also cause particularly low income rental units to be raised above the rent controlled guidelines. So I just worry that what that may do to an already pretty precarious housing situation. So I don't know if there's really a question in there or just kind of more things for us to consider and what the outcome of this might be, sort of beyond just what we're contemplating here today for the region and then our local municipalities' budgets. So I don't know if you have any comments, Mr. Dwyer or Mr. Sweeney, on that, or it's just more bad news for us to consider. Yeah.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sort of was trying to think back the number of years with regards to the police budget. I believe it's always been separated from my memory, okay, in terms of it was never considered at the same time. And what's going on here has been going on for years. The city councillors will point and say, well, the tax increase isn't my fault, it's the region being added on. And the region will say, well, no, you have to point at the Police Services Board. But the real issue here is who gives out the tax bill. It's the city. And when people get that in the mail and they see it, it's the city's fault. No matter how hard we try to illuminate all of this. So you have to keep that in mind. And eventually, ultimately, it's the mayor's fault.
I think that was more of a statement, but Councillor Foxton.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know that we're going to be attacked no matter what. Yeah. But this is tough time for everybody. And if they can vent at me and let some of their frustration go, then I'll take it. Because it is a tough time. And they've got nowhere else to go. So sometimes we take it. Especially our staff take it a lot more than I ever wish they ever had to. But we'll take that. If it releases some of their frustration, I'll take it.
I don't have any other questions. Mr. Dyer, I know you skipped to the very end of your presentation. Want to make sure, you've had an opportunity to cover off the items you want. We are just slightly over. We've got, some likely time, but I want to make sure we leave that with you, your discretions to if you've covered everything.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I believe we've done that. There's a couple of slides that we'll bring back as part of our presentation on January the 18th, but I think we've covered off all the important stuff we wanted to today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's all I've got for questions, I believe. I will ask if there are no other communications. Is there any other business? That being said, we will now start a vote to adjourn the meeting. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Nowak. Please use your yes or no button to vote. I would say we've carried that. We will now take 5 to 10 minutes to get set up for the Board of Public Health meeting to commence here shortly. It is 4:41, so 10 minutes.